I am 39 years old, from Ohio, USA, and for 14 months I paid for a wedding without ever hearing my fiancé's parents' names spoken once. Not once. I used to think that was just how some families were. I was wrong. And when I finally learned why she'd erased them, I realized some silences aren't grief at all. Some silences are control. If you've ever built your whole future on top of something someone else was quietly hollowing out underneath you, stay with me. You already know how this feeling ends. My name's Daniel Whitfield. I run a small residential contracting crew outside Columbus, Ohio. I've got a 10-year-old son, Mason, from my first marriage, which ended without a single slammed door. His mother and I still show up to his football games together, sit in the same row, and neither of us has ever made that kid pick a side. I mention that because it matters later. I know exactly what it looks like when adults handle things the right way, even when it costs them. I thought I understood what it looked like when someone didn't. I didn't understand the shape it actually takes, not even close. Here's my flaw up front, so you don't have to wait for it. When someone I love hands me a story that makes their pain sound neat and finished, I don't ask enough follow-up questions. Rachel Coleman told me her parents were gone from her life, and I let that one sentence do 14 months of work it never should have been trusted with. Rachel walked into a home renovation showroom I was subcontracted at in April, needing a quote on refinishing her late grandmother's dining table. She was 34, quick-witted, funny in a dry, delayed way that took me a couple of conversations to catch up to. She was also, from week one, careful. Not shy, careful. She'd answer something about her childhood with one clean fact, then pivot the conversation somewhere else so smoothly I didn't notice the turn until we were 3 topics away. The first time I asked about her parents, she said, "They're not part of my life anymore." I said I was sorry. She said, "Don't be. It was their decision, not mine," and reached for her wine glass. That was the end of the conversation for almost a year. Here's what made all of this so hard to see coming. Rachel was genuinely good to people. She remembered my crew foreman's wife's name after meeting her once. She drove 90 minutes to sit in a hospital waiting room with a coworker's grandmother because the coworker couldn't leave shift. When one of my guys lost his father to a stroke in July, Rachel organized the entire meal train herself and dropped off dinners to a man's house she'd met twice. Watching her be that consistently kind to near strangers made the silence around her own parents feel like something private and painful, not something built on purpose. We got engaged in September at a lookout point above the Hocking Hills, and I proposed with my late mother's ring. Rachel cried harder than I'd ever seen her cry, before or after. I believed every second of it. I still believe that part was real. Wedding planning started that October, and this is the part one need you to notice with me, because at the time, I didn't. Rachel took over every vendor deposit. All of them. She said she had the spreadsheet brain for it, and I laughed and let her, because I was pulling 60-hour weeks trying to bank enough time off before the wedding. In November, she told me the venue needed another $1,600, cash preferred. I handed it over without asking why cash. In December, it was the florist, $950 more. I didn't examine any of it. I told myself I was a man who trusted his fiancée with money. That felt like a virtue. It was actually a man who had quietly stopped paying attention to his own wedding. Invitations went out the first week of January. I sat at Rachel's kitchen table addressing envelopes and noticed the parent line on her side of the template was blank. Just Rachel Coleman and nothing after it. I asked. She said quietly, not looking up from the envelope she was sealing, "My parents won't be there. Can we just leave it blank?" I said okay. That's the part one still sit with. I said okay and sealed the next envelope. Thursday, January 15th, 7:04 a.m., the first crack, though I didn't clock it as one yet. Rachel's phone rang while she was in the shower. It was sitting on the counter by the coffee maker. I wasn't snooping. The screen read, Priya N., Riverside Home Care. I assumed it was a wrong number for a business line and didn't think about it again for weeks. The truth, when it finally surfaced, wasn't loud. It came from a stranger named Priya Nair, and it came completely by accident. Saturday, February 21st. I was picking up lumber 40 minutes outside town and stopped at a diner for coffee before the drive back. A woman in the next booth was on the phone, and she said a name that stopped me cold. Mr. Coleman's oxygen line needs replacing again, and Mrs. Coleman can't lift it on her own anymore. I've told the daughter 3 times now. I don't fully know why I turned around. I think some part of me had been listening for that name for months without admitting it. I said, "Excuse me, did you say Coleman?" She looked at me carefully. Her name tag read Priya. She said, "Are you family?" I said, "I'm engaged to Rachel Coleman." Her face did something I'll never forget. Not shock, relief, tangled up with grief. She said, "Then you need to know where her parents actually are." Warren and Linda Coleman were living 11 minutes from that diner, in a small rented duplex on Ferris Lane, in a town Rachel had told me, back in September, didn't really exist for her anymore. Warren was 76, on oxygen for COPD. Linda was 72, and had fallen twice in the past year. Priya had been their home health aide for 2 years, paid out of Warren's pension, and she showed up off the clock most weekends anyway, because nobody else did. I asked the question I was afraid of, does Rachel know they're here? Priya said, she's the one who moved them here 2 years ago. Told them it was closer to specialists. It's 40 minutes from her apartment. She visits maybe once a month. Always alone. Always with paperwork. Sunday, February 22nd, 11:20 a.m. I drove to Ferris Lane alone and knocked on a door with peeling paint. Linda Coleman answered in a cardigan with a hole in the elbow and started crying before I even finished introducing myself. Inside, the house was clean but stripped bare, no photos on the walls except one, a school picture of Rachel, maybe 7 years old, taped, not framed, to the fridge. Warren sat in a recliner with a cannula under his nose. When he found out who I was, he said, "She's getting married," not a question, like he'd read it somewhere rather than been told. I asked how he knew. He nodded toward a folder on the side table. Inside were bank statements, automatic withdrawals, monthly, made out to a name I recognized instantly, because I'd written checks to the same vendor myself, the wedding venue. 7 months of withdrawals from Warren and Linda's retirement account, $500 to $1,300 at a time, funding a wedding they weren't invited to and didn't know they were paying for. Rachel had held power of attorney over her parents' finances since Warren's diagnosis 2 years earlier. She'd used it to move them somewhere quiet. Then she'd used it to move their money somewhere quiet, too. I want to be honest about something. The money wasn't what made me angry first. What made me angry, later, quietly, was that a woman capable of driving 90 minutes for a coworker's grandmother had let her own mother fall twice in a house nobody checked on but an aide working for free on her weekends. I didn't confront Rachel that day. I sat in my truck outside Ferris Lane for almost 10 minutes before I could make myself drive. What shifted in me wasn't rage. It was quieter and more permanent than that, the exact moment you stop asking someone to explain themselves and start deciding what you're going to do regardless of what they say. I'd spent 14 months extending Rachel every benefit of the doubt I had. Sitting in that truck, I ran out. Monday, February 23rd, I called an elder law attorney, a woman named Carol Jennings, who'd handled a property matter for my uncle years back. I told her everything. She told me 2 things. First, that Warren and Linda, frail as they were both still legally competent, meaning they could revoke a power of attorney themselves today if they wanted to. Second, that regardless of what happened between Rachel and me, her control over their accounts needed to end. Tuesday, February 24th, I drove Carol out to Ferris Lane myself. Warren signed the revocation with a hand that shook from the oxygen, not from doubt. Linda asked me to stay in the room while she signed hers, held my hand through the whole thing, and said, "You're the first person who's asked us what we wanted in longer than I can remember." That afternoon, Carol helped them set up a new power of attorney, to Priya Nair, who'd been showing up for 2 years for people who weren't paying her to, and took the job anyway because someone had to. I didn't tell Rachel any of it. I let the days count instead. Wednesday, she texted twice about seating charts. Thursday, for more texts, still just logistics. Friday, the venue withdrawal bounced. The coordinator called her about the missed payment, and the texts changed. 11 that day. By Sunday, 26. By the following Tuesday, 34. Most of them just my name, over and over, no message attached. She had no idea yet what had actually happened. She only knew something had stopped working, and she didn't know why. She showed up at the shop the next Wednesday at 4:50 p.m. and said, "My dad's account is locked. The venue is threatening to cancel." "What did you do?" I told her plainly. Ferris Lane. Prionaire. The folder of statements. Carol Jennings. The new power of attorney. I watched her face while I said it, waiting for shock, denial, anything. What I got instead was quiet, the kind of quiet Rachel always used to control a room. Except this time it wasn't controlling anything. It was just empty. She said, "You had no right." I said I had every right. I was about to marry into that family. I'd just met it 14 months late. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She said, "You don't understand what it costs to take care of them." I told her the truth, that I'd just spent 4 days watching a stranger do it for free. I still don't fully understand how Rachel had managed to make caring for her own parents sound like an unbearable burden, while convincing everyone around her there was nothing left to care for at all. My voice never rose once during that whole conversation. It didn't need to. Rachel left the shop the same way she'd walked into it 14 months earlier, composed, sharp, already 3 steps ahead. Except this time, there was nowhere left for her to steer it. I called off the wedding the following Monday. I recovered what deposits I could and let the rest go. Carol told me I could have pursued Rachel legally for the money already spent. I decided I didn't want to spend one more month of my life measuring what I was owed by a woman who'd measured her own parents by what they could still provide her. Warren Coleman passed away in May, at home on Ferris Lane, with Priya beside him and Linda holding his hand. I was there too. Rachel wasn't, not because anyone stopped her, but because by then Linda had quietly stopped calling to tell her things, and Rachel had stopped asking. I still visit Linda most weekends. Mason comes with me sometimes and helps her water the 1 tomato plant she keeps by the back step. It doesn't undo what happened to her. It doesn't need to. I'm not there to fix anything. I'm there because somebody finally decided to show up without being asked twice. I don't know if Rachel has ever gone back to Ferris Lane. I know I'm not waiting to find out, and not waiting is its own kind of answer. I got engaged to a woman I thought had no family left worth protecting. It turned out she had 2 people who needed protecting from her the entire time. Once I saw that clearly, I stopped needing anything from Rachel at all. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Nothing. That's not the same thing as peace. It's better. It's just done. If this story hit you somewhere, let me know in the comments, and if you've ever had to choose between someone you loved and someone who actually needed you, tell me which one you picked and how you knew.